This entire military is one cohesive, dedicated force. And the threats to our nations, they don't sleep. They're watching our every move. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. They may be watching this right now. Our military should not be mistaken for a cable news gabfest show. We don't care what you look like. We don't care who you voted for, who you worship, what you worship, who you love. It doesn't matter if your dad left you millions when he died or if you knew who your father was. We have been honed into a machine of lethal moving parts that you would be wise to avoid if you know what's good for you. We will not be intimidated. We will not back down. We don't want war. But if you want war with the United States of America, there's one thing I can promise you, so help me God. Someone else will raise your sons and daughters.
Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Welcome to the From Pain to Purpose radio show. I am your host, Leah Fulton. In this show, we explore the incredible journeys of resilience, healing, and transformation. In each episode, we will sit down with individuals who have faced unimaginable struggles and turned their pain into power, heartbreak into hope, and their challenges into meaningful change and finding new purpose in life. Through candid conversations and inspiring stories, we will uncover how pain, whether emotional, physical, mental, or spiritual, can be the catalyst for profound growth and a deeper sense of purpose. So if you are looking for motivation, insight, and real stories of triumph over adversity, you're in the right place. Let's get started on this journey from pain to purpose. Let's give veterans a voice through Military Broadcast Talk.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, Eva. How's it going?
It's good. Another hike in the I've done it pack of list of things, so I'm feeling pretty good, motivated.
Good. Another week, huh?
Another week. It was probably my most unprepared hike.
Sometimes those work out the best, right?
But you know what? Sometimes we take it with life, one step at a time, jumping from one rock, one boulder at a time. I forgot so much in my pack, but I made it, and that's all that counts.
That's right.
It's all. So this is my last week with you as a co-host, right?
Well, I'll still be around. I'm not going to
be around.
It's been all these years, so I can't quit you.
Oh, you're so sweet. So tell everybody what you're doing.
Oh, so Labor Day, I finally decided to go live with my own show here on MBR Talk. It's called, brain fart. Full Speed Ahead After Battle. Sorry, it's been a long week for me. Full Speed Ahead After Battle. Coming from the Navy, we're going to be talking. One of the things that's passionate to me and close to me is that transition from military to the civilian life, because whether people know it or not, that is one of the main factors in veteran suicide. And so we're going to be trying to help veterans share their stories with that transition, whether it's good or bad. We'll be listening to, also, I got some professionals coming on about mental health, suicide awareness, all kinds of different stuff. We're going to be talking to people, helping us out with how to change those resumes to fit the new civilian world, right? How to get ready for those interviews. And so we're going to be doing a lot of different stuff. It's going to be raw talk. It's going to be raw humor. We're bringing that military humor to the show because, that's what gets us through a lot of those struggles in life. So premiering, Labor Day at 7 Central. It's going to be Full Speed Ahead After Battle here on MBR Talk.
Wow. So you'll be right after my show then?
No, Mondays.
No, 1
Monday.
hour in between. Yeah. I forget your Central Time.
Yeah, Central Time. So.
Well, we have a fabulous guest, and if I didn't say that today is August 23rd, the year of our Lord, 2025, and I have a fabulous guest on today. I think I've been following her for a while on LinkedIn. And sometimes you just kind of not stalk them, but you do follow them because you know that they have an interesting journey somewhere. But then when I saw this news article and she was posting about it, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to have her on the show. So I'm really proud to have joining us is Leah Stiles. She's a U.S. Navy senior chief, an advocate, a survivor who's faced some serious issues with an eating disorder, but she did it in silence. And if this was not a blessing in disguise kind of story, I don't know what is. But she did it. And then, unfortunately, I think for my takeaway from her story was that her getting kicked out of the military is what saved her life. And we'll be sharing all of her information out there. And, here we are for our, where did it go? Interview of the week.
The interview of the week is brought to you by Jersey Mike's, a sub above.
Hi, Leah.
Hi there.
Welcome to the From Pain to Purpose radio show. Obviously, it's video too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I saw that you had, posted that, and I'm gonna post in the comment section that there was this war horse story that come out. Tell us how that evolved.
Okay, great. So yes, the war horse. I've been working with a journalist named Noelle since January, and we've been really just spending lots of time over the last few months. Me telling my story, me telling the story of other service members and veterans, and we've been working on it since January, and it came out last week. Um, I heard from a few people that they saw it. It was really great. And then a couple days ago it got picked up by military.com and navytimes.com and Army Times and Marine Corps Times. So most of the military publications. And so that's when things started getting interesting. There was lots of excitement and comments and uh discussions brought around about the article, which I'm really excited about because this is kind of a taboo topic. There's a lot of stigma around it. It's been something where there's not a lot of conversation, and so I'm really excited that this is started so many conversations that can truly end up being life-saving.
Yeah, totally. I know when we were talking before a show, and so both you and Josh are from the Navy. I'm from the Army, and I clearly remember being active duty and always worried about weigh-in. And although not the purging side, it was actually, I saw plenty of us who, went on extreme diets before we were going to have weigh-ins, anything from just water fasting for a week or taking, X-Lax and, just trying to make sure that you were as clean out as possible. But then to have to do the same day, go take your PT test at probably your less than optimal physical, capacity, just being weak and then trying to make sure you make it. And then I was only 5'2". That I would have had to been a teeny meeny, Twiggy, right? That's right. Remember the whole term about Twiggy? Everything was supposed to be about Twiggy, but at 5'2", and I was stocky, that would have been impossible. I got taped almost every single time. And that mindset still is with me even now. How do I not look like that? But I also did some of the gorging side uh, for the troubles, and I've had to flip that narrative around. So how did let's go back to how that story of what happened you getting out of the Navy.
Yes, so I served in the military. I served in the Navy 20 years. And I had my eating disorder before I ever joined. I had my eating disorder when I was 11. I was hospitalized as a teen multiple times for my eating disorder. But when I went and met with the recruiter, I told the recruiter about it, but I told him that I thought that I was better. Because I did think that I was better. And he said, well, if you're better, then we don't have to write anything down or tell anybody about it. And so I was like, okay, but I definitely thought I was better. But it was that first weigh in, Eva. It was the first weigh in front of my peers. And I wasn't at risk at failing the weigh in at all. It was still extremely triggering to me to be weighed in front of people I worked with or that I knew. And it was a public occurrence. So I knew before each weigh-in that even if I was not at risk of failing, I wanted to be the smallest version of myself. Like you said, like I wanted everything out, every ounce. I mean, I would cut my hair. I wanted to be the smallest version of myself because well, for a lot of reasons, probably couldn't go over all of them in this hour, but for a lot of what made me such a great sailor, because I had a ton of accolades. I really excelled. I made it to senior chief and a pretty quick time, especially as a mass communication specialist. And what a lot of the things that made me such a good sailor made me terrible in my eating disorder, such as discipline and perfectionism. So I took weigh-ins as a challenge to, just as much as most of us want to max out on the run and the push-ups and, whatever it is at that time, I wanted to be the smallest version of myself.
Yeah. That had to have been tough. The article, it sounded like, was his name Chief Phillips? Is that his name?
Yes, I was CMC
really,
Phillips.
really tried to do his best to hold you, I want to say accountable. Is that the right phrase? That he was trying to help you out and give you those opportunities, but then just had to call you on it.
Yes. Well, he called me on it from day one. So, mind you, by the time I met, um, at the time, Command Master Chief Phillips, I had already been in about 16, 17 years. And so I had had how many leaders in those 17 years? Many of which many of them knew that I would cycle between fasting, which is part of my anorexia diagnosis, and purging, sometimes purging up to 8 times a day. Many of my leaders knew. I tried to, keep it silent for like the first decade, but things started unraveling in the second decade to the point where I even ruptured my esophagus from purging so much.
Wow.
And when I got back from the hospital, I heard, well, the commanding officer wants to see you. And I thought to myself, if there's any leader that could or would help me in this situation, it would have been that commanding officer. I had worked for him 3 years in a row. Each of those 3 years, I was his Sailor of the Year. So he knew my work ethic.
Right.
And then I made chief, and I was a senior enlisted leader at that command. And so when I heard the commanding officer wanted to talk to me, I, knocked on his door and went to go enter his office and sit on the couch like I did every single morning. And instead, he stood me at attention and told me, there's no place in my Navy for you.
Wow.
And then he began trying to process me out. He saw it as a discipline issue. He didn't know what he didn't know. But when I got orders to my dream aircraft carrier, I wanted orders to the bush so bad. And when I got orders to the bush, they flagged my orders because I had ruptured my esophagus, and that was in the orders. So they flagged my orders and they declined me to come to the ship. And I was just determined. I was like, there's no way. Like, these are my dream orders. I requested a meeting with the triad to reverse the med hold. And that was the day that I met Command Master Chief Phillips. And he was a former corpsman, so he had the medical experience, but he also had a loved one who had an eating disorder. So he knew how many liters I had been through. He knew, how much I had minimized this in my life. And he knew how dangerous it was. So that very day that I came to the ship and he accepted my orders was the day that he gave the rules. There's no purging on my ship. I will be checking your labs every 2 weeks. I will be eating meals with you. We will be checking in. And I said, absolutely, because I wanted orders so bad. And I also truly believed that I could do that. I truly believed that I could meet the criteria that he set for me, which I did until it was time for deployment, and couldn't last any longer then.
Why do you think that you couldn't last, though? I mean, was it just being on the ship, or was it the space?
No, it was a series of crazy unfortunate events around that same time. So for me and my eating disorder, in order to not purge, my answer to that would be don't eat. Don't eat on
Right.
the ship. So while that's fine day to day when the ship is pierside, when we started doing workups, now I'm going out to sea and trying not to purge, so I'm not eating. And so I started, things when we were on workups was when I started purging on the ship again. And because there was just no place else for me to do it, and I was absolutely addicted to it, right? And then I had to eat. There was no option. That was the only place. So it kind
Right.
of started then, but it was also a time where a time period for 18 months of my life, I went to 8 suicide memorials right around that
Wow.
that time period of those orders. My next door neighbor was a command master chief. He was my mentor. He was family. We did our family together. He wrote the Navy's policy on suicide prevention, and I discovered him hanging in the shed that night. And it was just and then my mother committed suicide, and my niece who lived with me, she completed her suicide, and there was 8 in 18 months back to back like that. So the alignment of the deployment with my mental health was just not sustainable for me anymore.
Yeah. Wow. I can't imagine. I'm sorry. I just cannot imagine. Did you ever come across others that were had eating disorders too
Oh,
on the
yes.
ship?
So
Yeah.
that's the interesting thing about having come into the Navy already having an eating disorder and being eating disorder informed was you're definitely able to spot it in others. And so I had joined right before 9/11. In fact, my first day of A school was 9/11.
Oh
Um
wow.
And so, I kind of saw a shift in how we looked at mental health, how we talked about mental health, especially around PTSD. So before 9/11, we definitely thought PTSD was the generation before us. We didn't know that was our peers. And so I saw a shift in how the military and especially leadership began recognizing PTSD, and how we learned to recognize it in our shipmates and each other, how we learned what support was available, what resources were available. So I always kind of thought that the eating disorder conversation would come shortly after that, the same way, we broke through the taboo stigma of PTSD. And so I would bring it up. I would hold like eating disorder awareness fairs, trying not to out myself why I would do those things, but I would do those things. And, during my CPO season, I made that right at the 10-year mark too. When they would teach us all of the different resources for everything, I would say, but what is there for eating disorders? And, how do we approach that? And it's just always been one of those things that for one reason or another, eating disorders are not part of the mental health conversation.
I can totally identify. It's that body image aspect of things. And in 2022, at the beginning of COVID, I had joined the VA's Move program. So I'd like to say I'm a VA Move program success story. I ended up getting a gastric sleeve and have lost 70 pounds But that weight gain was mostly from poor eating habits of poor partially, but then medication, helped me gain the rest of that weight. And then I just couldn't move anymore. I was literally walking around with a walker, the red rollator thing. Just 3 years ago, I was walking around on a walker and couldn't go anywhere. So I certainly can identify with the struggles from a different side of things. Josh, did you see guys who were going
Yeah,
through some of these trials as well?
I think a lot of the guys, we experienced it differently. As far as I know, there wasn't much purging among the guys that I know, but we definitely went through, the laxatives. And I know some people went as far as rubbing preparation H all over and wrapping up in saran wrap to try and drop water weight and things like that. But I think there's kind of a double standard because the females are looked at a lot more when it comes to sensitivity and mental health and things like that. The guys, they're just, it's the old good old boys club, right? It's the guys being guys. So, you know, maybe I don't know why. I guess your story's a little bit different because you were in the goat locker, and I know that there were a lot of people that they didn't care about their body image. Some of those guys, as long as you got that big neck and you make tape, you're okay. And how do those guys get away with things like that when there's people out there legitimately struggling like you did? And so, it brought up another topic. I was reading through your stories, and it seems like you're catching a lot of flack, a lot of negative comments and stuff on that. So maybe, what do you have to say about that negativity that people are bringing to you?
Well, I would have to say, first of all, I'm thankful even for that. I'm thankful for the conversation. Yeah, there's a lot of variety in the comments about the story that came out, and uh, some of my closer people have said, Leah, lovingly, don't go in the comments. Don't reply to the comments. Some of them are just mean or harsh or ignorant. And I said no, lovingly, that's the perfect place for this conversation. And so I have replied a lot. You'll see a lot of replies in there. I have replied in the comments, and maybe the person that I'm replying to, they're not going to get it or understand, or they're going to, want to remain uneducated or ignorant on the topic. Hopefully, it never comes to one of their loved ones having an eating disorder, because sometimes that's what it takes. I hope I would never wish that on anybody. People don't realize how common this is and how much this is affecting. It's in fact affecting 1/3 of females and 1/5 of males in our military community. So with me replying to the comments in there, it's not always to the person that made the comment. It's to the other people that can see it, right? And that there's other people that are identifying with a lot of this, and it's to provide them the validation and the information and the opportunity to learn. Um, there's so many times when I give our training, we have a training called MEDAL. It's the Military Eating Disorder Awareness and Literacy. And wow, it's still hard to see that picture. And so many times after that training, we hear, I didn't know what I didn't know. Right. And so there are at least people in the comments that are realizing that, like, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that the number one cause of death for somebody with an eating disorder is suicide. I didn't know that eating disorders can happen in any size body, at any age, all genders, all race. People don't know that. They didn't know that they didn't know that. Um, that when I give my training, I ask military leadership, first of all, can you name eating disorders? Can you name more than 2 eating disorders? Usually they can't. Most people don't know there's 6. Most people can name anorexia. They remember it from either the Lifetime channel or, some kind of like talk show host, and I say, okay, so, if you were looking at your department or your division or your circle, right, how would you identify somebody with anorexia? And the answers are generally the same. They say, oh, tiny. They would be tiny, frail, skeletal, malnutrition. And I say that's less than 6% of people with an eating disorder that fall into the underweight category. The other 94% do not fall into the underweight category. So if that's what you're waiting for to be able to identify somebody in your circle, because I guarantee there's somebody in your department, division, or family with an eating disorder, I guarantee it, then you're going to get it wrong 94% of the time.
Wow. I guess it's that it goes back to that Twiggy comment that I made earlier, right? Because that was, in some ways what a lot of the models have been modeled after was that Twiggy look from the 60s. And that's the ideal shape. How many clothes that we see out there on the clothes racks that, only look great if you're, uh, 105 pounds, but if you've got 140, or more, then it just doesn't fit right.
Same thing at the exchange for uniforms.
Yeah. And I think the hardest was when we have kids in the service and the uniforms just do nothing for the figure. Even the maternity ones, they do nothing. I mean, it just they're not flattering at all. I mean, I get it, they're not supposed to be flattering, but they don't help us, and our body shapes are different than the guys in the first place, even in the BDUs. That we're just built different.
Yeah, we're
So,
seeing a lot of maternity things in the post where people are saying, coming back from having a baby. And I'm in a lot of like the different leadership Facebook groups and the enlisted female Facebook groups, and a couple times a week we're seeing young women searching for advice on how to shrink their bodies, post having a baby. And the advice that's given by well-meaning leaders, well-meaning shipmates, is the same advice that I saw 20, 22 years ago. The cabbage soup diet, the apple diet, the watermelon diet, limit your calories to this, get your exercise, to breastfeeding women, to postpartum breastfeeding women. This is not the advice to be given. Like
no.
what we have normalized over the years that has just been normalized to shrink our bodies is not okay. It's disordered and it's unhealthy. And so there's so much conversation on this fit not fat talk right now. And people are so afraid of the word fat or being fat or looking fat, or that we think the opposite of fat is fit. And that's not true at all. The opposite of fat is not fit. And in fact, if you're doing crazy things to shrink your body, and your brain is now in what we call low energy availability status, which it's not hard to get into LEA. It's not hard to get into low energy availability. So if you are on one of those,
I gotta look that up. Hold on. I gotta look that up. What is that? Low energy
availability.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a state of the body where, if you're on a fad diet, or you're restricting calories, or you're restricting a certain food group, or you're limiting water intake, as you said, the water diet, there's a lot of things that happens to the body. So your brain, your decision-making skills, your response time, your response to injury, a lot of these things become a factor. Yeah, exactly. And reds is really important to look at as well in athletes. So yeah, if you're doing these things, to shrink your body, and you end up in a state of low energy availability, none of that equals fitness. Look at that right there.
deliberate restriction of calories, skipping meals, or other unhealthy eating patterns. I got referred to the dietitian I don't know how many times. And it's like, okay, here's 1200 calorie diet is what you're supposed to limit at. And I would try I don't know how many times, and here's the 5 main food groups and blah blah blah. You don't have time for that. And then I had kids and I didn't have time for that. But I didn't have the funds for it either. I now am on a all organic and glutamate-free diet. I've been part of the American study diet for Gulf War veterans, and I've been feeling so much better. I suffer from major headaches with glutamate and nitrates. Major headaches. It was almost getting me to where I couldn't function, and I still work full time. So you've turned this into a nonprofit, right?
I have. I have. So after I left the bush, and then I went to 2 years of eating disorder treatment. I lived for almost 2 years. That picture you saw with the NG tube up my nose, I almost died multiple times. And they in fact offered me palliative care. They didn't. It had progressed so long, almost 30 years, that they didn't imagine that I could, come back from it. And that kind of made me mad when they offered me that. And I thought to myself, I've survived too much. My story doesn't end here, and I've lost too many people. And I was like, my story doesn't end here. And I was talking to Hubin, the same guy that medevaced me off the ship, and I said, I want to make a difference, but I don't know how, and I don't know what. And he said, you're never really going to make a difference, Leah, in your healing or for the military or anything, as long as you're still, hiding behind this and being secretive. So I
Yeah.
said, in a moment of spite and, a glass of wine or two, I posted my story on all of my socials, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook. And I said, I've had an eating disorder for 30 years. I'm sorry to those that I was hiding it from and lying to and all of those things. And what happened was it created kind of a movement where people just started contacting me a lot, and they were sharing their story, or they were saying, that's my shipmate or my sister or my brother or my daughter. And, they were just so bravely telling me their story. And then they would say, okay, so I finally admitted it. So now what?
Yeah.
And so reflecting on my journey as a senior chief who couldn't barely get resources or support or, inpatient treatment or, anything like that. And, Hubin went on to be the force master chief, and he still struggled to be able to help me find support. And I thought, if the two of us are struggling to find this kind of like support, I don't have much good news to give the people that are asking for help.
Yeah.
And, having been a senior chief, having been a mom, my son's active duty now, having lost so many people, as we talked about, already to mental health issues, I thought I gotta create a solution. I gotta make these resources available. So I founded Sea Waves as a solution to that.
I'm getting goosebumps now. I don't know. I seriously got goosebumps. Leah, I don't always tell a lot of people, but I'm gonna tell you right now, welcome to my people garden. I don't know if you've seen that that's my book. I grow my people garden and sow seeds of hope and faith that you're doing God's work. I don't know if anybody's told you that, but you're doing God's work and
Thank
you're
you. I
you're saving
appreciate
lives, and that's just incredible. To be so vulnerable, that's got to be tough, and to hear this kind of criticism that you're getting back on the social media. And you said, I think before the show, that you've got your social media team that is helping you answer those as well. But how does that make you feel on the inside, though? I mean, how are you coping with it?
I'm choosing to focus on the good. And so since this article broke and since, all these comments and everything, we've taken on 5 new cases of service members needing support.
Mm.
We've gotten approved for a grant next month. We've gotten multiple donations. We've gotten new team members. I've gotten 2 new board members, all these things that I've been just stressing myself over the past 6 months, and trying to get the word out there and let people know that we're here and grow our team and all those things. There are all these blessings that are coming out left and right. So there's so much more good than bad than those few comments. And so, yeah, there's just way much more positive in this than negative.
I saw on your board you've got a really great group of people that are helping you as well.
And
you
we're
want
always
to?
looking for more. We are expanding our services and our team, and we're looking for a couple more board members. So that's definitely one way to get involved. I'll tell you a little more about Sea Waves and what we do.
Yeah, for sure. Go
Usually
ahead.
people ask me, why Sea Waves? Is that because you're Navy? And the answer is partially because in the Navy, we love a good acronym, and Sea Waves is actually an acronym for exactly what we do. So it's support, education, awareness, wellness, advocacy, validation for eating disorders and suicide prevention. And a lot of what we do is in the first three letters. So the S for support is we act as a bridge in between the military community. So think active duty, veterans, family members, caretakers. We don't care if it's from before 9/11 or after. We don't even care about your discharge status. If you're looking for support, we get you support. And so we connect you right over there with support. Everything from virtual support groups to inpatient treatment to providers, whatever the fit is for what you need, we get you in touch with those resources. The E for education is we've developed a program called MEDAL. It's the Military Eating Disorder Awareness and Literacy. And we go base to base or Zoom to Zoom, and we teach military leadership how to recognize this. Eating disorders 101. What does it look like? What does it not look like? What are some myths? And, what are some things that we just talked about that make it really hard to identify eating disorders because it's been normalized? So we provide that education, and that's developed into different webinars that we're giving. Our next webinar entitled Eating Disorder Prevention is Suicide Prevention is going to be September 10th at 3 p.m. Since this article launched, we've already had another 50 people sign up for that webinar. So that's really great. And you get CE credits and get to understand the tie between eating disorders and suicide. So that's the education piece. And then of course the advocacy. We got passed in 2023 and we passed the SERVE Act into law, which is going to do two things. Number one, it's going to mandate education for military leadership. So that's been passed into law, but nobody knows about it. So we do advocacy so that people can know that education is mandatory. Also, we talked about how TRICARE right now doesn't pay for inpatient or residential treatment for eating disorders for anybody over the age of 21, which is how I almost died. And so that too got passed into law to change that age to 55, yet it hasn't been implemented by the Department of Defense. So advocacy is a big part of what we do to make sure that that the laws and the resources are available to our military community.
Wow. I'm just, it boggles my mind. Has the VA been helpful at all through this or no?
There are some that are trying. There are a couple different VAs that have stood up eating disorder programs, which is great. And there are more that want to. And so that's another thing I do is I train some of the dietitians at the VAs, or I train some of the behavioral health clinicians, because the sad part is that most providers do not receive more than 15 minutes of formal education about eating disorders. And military leadership, they receive zero, right? And so that's why we kind
That's
of
crazy.
give this education to solve that piece as well. But there are multiple different VAs that have gotten pretty active, and there are other ones that want to. So I work hard to try to connect everybody for, here's the places that have done it, and here's the places that want to do it, and connect each other on how to get it going.
So have you connected with a lot of the Facebook groups? Because I know I manage several female veteran Facebook groups, and probably need to share the information more in those groups. And you and I are definitely going to need to talk offline. I'm working on my PhD in public administration.
Awesome.
And I'm studying the unfulfilled needs of female combat veterans. So the first of its kind in the public administration arena side of things. So definitely want to make sure that, when we stay in touch, and I'm want to maybe even offer I could be one of your board members or an advisor of sorts if you wanted as well, or in whatever works. What is your take, Josh, on how can we also help advocate this plight with the guy population as well?
Well, I think, let me touch on the leadership aspect of where she's coming from a little bit. Just statistically speaking, to get to a senior chief in the Navy, it's difficult, right? And to be a female senior chief, it's even more difficult, especially given what, Leah's gone through. So I think it lends credibility to the topic that she's now standing up, or, Leah, that you're now standing up and making this a visible topic. Because, you said when you were in, everybody talked about PTSD and mental health awareness. Well, the 8 years I was in, all the talks we had were on DUIs. Don't do it, right? We didn't talk PTSD, and until recently, that wasn't a topic that I discussed much either. And so I think, just what we're doing now, getting out here and talking about this and being a leader that's willing to stand up and say something now, I think is what needs to be done. So with these stories coming out, people talking about it more and more, getting other military leadership involved in having that same discussion, not just with the people, getting out and experiencing it, but, what do you say to those leaders that are currently in and come across a similar situation, that you experienced? What would you tell them the actions that they need to start taking now before it's too late?
Oh, that's a good question. I love that question. Number one is, and this is a sticky topic sometimes, but
Mhm.
I truly believe in intrusive leadership. Ask a few more questions, talk a little bit more, because there were different leaders along the way. People would ask me, like, senior chief, all these events that we go to, I notice you never eat. Right. And why? Why don't you eat? And I would say, one excuse or another. Sometimes I would say, like, oh, well, I'm keto and there's nothing here that's keto. And they'd be like, oh, well, that makes sense. Next topic, next conversation. Or I'd say, I'm intermittent fasting. That was really popular at that time too. And it is sometimes now too. But, and they would say, oh, good job. Like, wow, you're so disciplined. Like, and I would say, question things like that. Right. Because yes, I was intermittent fasting. You assumed it was 8 hours, but sometimes it was 8 days. Right. And now I'm on the flight deck,
Wow.
100-degree weather, in charge of other people's lives. And I've been fasting for 8 days. So it's like, ask another question, talk a little more. Let's not assume that things like this are discipline and commend them like, good job, so ask a few questions. There are different red flags that come up, and I would say make time for those questions and communications. It's okay to ask somebody, do you struggle with your relationship with food? Do you struggle with your relationship with your body? Is this impacting, your day to day, your concentration, your ability to work? Ask questions like that. It's absolutely okay to do that. What are some things that are not okay, right? Like, let's not ever comment on the size of somebody's body or the food that they're having, especially at a social event, publicly, right? If you have, questions or concerns like that, those are private, and they are to be done, not in a joking manner, and with compassion. And then I would say, educate yourself, with the facts that 1/3 of females and 1/5 of males in the military are dealing with disordered eating. And approximately between 9 and 11% are being diagnosed with an eating disorder, and that's without a screening in place. There's no screening in the military for this. Then
Right.
that somebody you either have led, are leading, or will be dealing with this. And so I would ask that you educate yourself and handle it as you do any other mental health conversation. Eating disorders have the second highest mortality rate of all mental illnesses, higher than PTSD. They're second only to opioid use. And in the military, we don't have much drug use, of course. We have some, and zero tolerance. But what's the next coping mechanism that we have? What can
Yeah.
what can you control to deal with, stress, anxiety?
And it's not illegal.
It's not illegal. Trust me, I tried that one on Cuban when he tried to medevac me off the ship. I was like, you cannot medevac me when you're allowing other people in the Chiefs mess to finish their meal and go have a cigarette. They're allowed to do something unhealthy afterwards, and I should be allowed to do that too. I absolutely did try to fight him. God bless him for
So
sticking
you
with.
tried to justify it.
I sure did, because it
Yeah.
wasn't illegal, and I thought that it was my right to be able to purge after meals. To the point where I would tell people in the Chiefs mess when I would eat with them, "Gosh, I ate with you guys, but I'm gonna have to go throw up now." Um, and then I would. At some points, I was very nonchalant about it. And trust me, even in the Chiefs mess, they did not know what to say or do around that. But I would
Yeah.
say, let's normalize these conversations. Have the conversations.
So what is the first recommendation you have for somebody who is listening to this and saying, I might identify with this?
Yes, number one, I want to share that because I did see, Josh, thank you for sharing a couple of the crisis lines. Unfortunately, the ones you showed, they are not ED informed. And so for a crisis text line is ED informed. Which means that they all of their call centers, they all have learned about eating disorders and their tie to suicide. And so I would say if you are finding yourself struggling with any part of that, you don't need to be in a crisis to text crisis text line. So we text WAVES, WAVES, to 741-741. That's the C-Waves code, and it is virtual, it is free, and it is confidential. So it does not get back to your command, your medical record, anything like that. So that's immediate help and support.
Can you put that in the chat? Can you
Yes.
see the comments, or put it in the private chat and we'll put it in the comments?
Yes, will do. So that's number one. That's immediate help, right? And then I would say the C Waves resource page is the next great place to go to. It shows some of our vetted partners and organizations, places that are already ED informed, and shows a bunch of free virtual support groups. And then it also shows how to get in touch with us to get connected to any further support and resources. So that's going to be a great one. And then follow along on our socials. Sea Waves Inc. Is another great place. We share lots of great information, tips on how to have these conversations, and where to find more education and support.
So, I think there's a lot to digest from all of this, and I hate sounding like that, knowing the topic, but it really is true, right? There's a lot for folks to be able to comprehend, but what if there's a loved one who has, maybe it's not me, but I have a loved one who I know has the problem. How do you help? I think in some ways this gets to the codependency side of things, and you're not wanting to enable that person, but you're still having to have a difficult conversation because maybe they need a chief, Phillips in their life that says, listen, this is not good. I'm here to help hold you accountable, and I want to save your life. I'm not trying to help you take the wrong step. I'm helping to take you the right step.
Yes, that was all spot on, except for maybe the word accountable. That's the accountable could be a little hard. Let's say like I want to go on this journey with you. I want to support your journey. You deserve more. You deserve a quality of life. You deserve support. And I want you to have that. And then the great question in any mental health conversation would be, how can I best support you right now?
Yeah. And that's tough because that person also has to be willing to receive it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at different times in my career, I had my eating disorder for 30 years. And I would say 50% of the time I wanted help and was looking for help. And 50% of the time I was secretive and manipulative and didn't want, anybody involved in my business. But, making that claim that I hear you, I'm here for you, I will walk this journey with you, whether now or whenever you're ready, is always important.
But it wasn't just the eating side, it was also the mental health side that you were having to try to balance, right?
Right.
I
So that's
mean,
important to know that eating disorders have very little to do with food. That's actually a myth. Eating disorders are mental health, like PTSD, depression, anxiety, all of those things.
right.
The symptoms come through food, right? And so that can come in so many of a variety of ways. Like you talked about, some people, binge on food or gorge on food. Usually more than 90% of the time, a gorge or a binge comes after a period of some type of restriction. So you didn't allow yourself something, or a type of food, or a type of like that's usually a response to some kind of restriction. So
Some
those types
or
of
some
foods.
kind of major stress. That was normally
Mhm.
when that cake was really good.
Yeah, and
That
so
was my, I would probably gorge on the sweets, and now I'm choosing fruits or yogurt, and I'm having to make better choices. And it's still a struggle in a way that there's that part that says I miss those things, and trying to balance and say, no, I'm making better choices now.
yeah, and I think knowing what's healthy for you, that's a journey that people come to differently. And, sometimes what's healthy for you is going to be different than what's healthy for somebody else. Just like with how eating disorders manifest. For me, at different times it was purging. A lot of times it was exercise, over exercise. People would commend me all the time for running a half marathon, and, oh, senior chief, you just go on a random Wednesday and go run 13.1 miles. You're so dedicated. And finally one day I just turned to somebody and said, you think I'm running because I'm dedicated? I'm running because the Chiefs mess just had pizza and I had a slice and I feel guilty. And so
Yeah.
that was my like punishment for that, right? Like it wasn't discipline. And so that comes back to those leadership conversations too, is be careful what we commend. And I know you've been through a major weight loss, and so a lot of what we do when we see that people have lost weight is we automatically say congratulations or good job. But just as we wouldn't comment on somebody's hair loss after cancer treatment, right? Like we don't comment on people, the size of people's bodies, because you don't know what it took for them to get there, and you don't know if
Right.
that's a symptom of a disorder that they have, or or that it could trigger it. And so even when we have the most well-meaning compliments about people, like, oh my god, you look great, you've lost weight, even the most or even somebody that was sick or earlier and they've gained weight, and we say, well, that you look so much better or healthier, those things can be just as harmful. So there's way
Right.
too many other things that we can compliment about people than the size of their body. And so yeah, everything can be so different, whether you're replying to less food, less exercising, more exercising, purging through ways of laxatives, throwing up, restriction through water or too much water. There's such a gamut full of things that kind of fall, I teach on a spectrum of like, green and, healthy or intuitive eating, and then over to the red of a full blown eating disorder, receiving a diagnosis. And there's a huge spectrum in between that has a lot of yellow and orange. And in that
Mhm.
yellow and orange is where most of us actually live, with lots of disordered behaviors. But when they're not challenged or talked about or limited, it can go to the dangerous side, and back and forth, right? It's a complete spectrum. And so just being able to recognize it and know when we're in the, what color zone.
Well, I know that your future is looking bright. You are going to be a speaker at the Military Influencer Conference coming up next month. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that. The Military Influencers Conference has always been something I've been excited about, and I've been really making it a goal this year to do more speaking engagements. I'm doing more podcasts like this, speaking not only about my story, but the people that are still serving or that haven't found their voice yet. And so, being essentially the lighthouse on shedding a light on eating disorders in the military. So I'm super excited to be speaking there. I'm speaking at a women veterans gala in October. I'm the keynote speaker there. Adding to more and more of the speaking engagements and finishing up my first book. And so there'll be a whole media tour around the book as well, and hoping to get that out and published. It's very educational about eating disorders in the military, but each chapter does start off with a little piece of my memoir, just to kind of give like a face to the data and information that I provide in the book.
That is incredible. I can't wait. I know we've got just a few minutes left. So I usually try to end the show on what's the question I should have asked but didn't. So what is it?
You did a great job. You asked all of the great questions. You and Josh are great hosts. But let me think of something that we didn't cover, or just a point
we
to
did
kind of
cover
drive
the
home.
current military, right? What is your word to the wise for the current military?
Word to the wise is that eating disorders can occur in any body, any shape, any size, any age, gender, rank, in any body. They don't look like what we thought they looked like in the 80s and 90s. They're very, very dangerous, and they deserve, support, specialized support. We wouldn't go to an orthodontist to have your tooth pulled. So, we really need to make sure that we are supporting each other. These resources and the support is difficult to access, which is why C-Waves is here. We want to let you know that we can get you to them. Like, we have unlocked that code, and there's always education available, and just educate yourself. You don't know the life that you're going to be able to save, or how much your words matter. So I would definitely say, treat everybody with kindness. You don't know the journey that they're on. And, we always say, I say with C-Waves, we have two sayings, the same saying with two different punctuations. It's need a light, be a light, with a semicolon. So much of this, like pain to purpose. So I was in the dark. I almost died. But semicolon, my story doesn't end there. And then I went on to be the light for others, to, the lighthouse, to shine a light on this. And then we say it with a question mark. So need a light, question mark, be a light. And so that is, be the person you needed in that time when you were in the dark. Be that person. You needed a mother, be a mother to somebody. You needed a sister, you needed a brother, be that person to somebody, and you will be surprised how that lights your path. You would be surprised how that brings the purpose back for you.
I think you've hit the nail on the head on all of that. Such a pain to purpose story. I'm serious, and I think that God's definitely given you your voice. Thank you for coming on Military Broadcast Radio, and feel free to come on my show anytime. You let me know when your book is ready to come out, and we'll have to swap books, okay?
Yes.
I sign, you sign. We'll exchange, okay?
Yes, February is Eating Disorder Awareness Month. Let's put something on the calendar.
Okay, I'm ready. Yeah. And you can jump from show to show to show. We'll be happy because we all have different audiences,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on the show. I don't have a show next week, but because I'm taking Labor Day weekend off, and I'm probably gonna go hiking again. But I have William Stevens coming on September 6th, and he does a lot of homeless veteran outreach, which is really one of my heart stories that I'm passionate about. So thank you, Leah, for joining us. And, please, people, reach out to C-Waves and I hope y'all have a very blessed week.
Thank you, and
Thank-
thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you're welcome.
Senior.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us. Giving our veterans a voice.